On March 5, 1946, former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill gave one of his most famous speeches called the Iron Curtain Speech, which was given to the students of Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri. President Truman, an alumni of the school, introduced him and invited him. The speech was intended to get Americans' support to fight against the spread of communism around the world, and it was regarded by many people as the beginning of what was called the Cold War era. In order to understand the effect and multitude of this speech, it is necessary to look at three things about the speech. First, the historical context. Second, the purpose of the speech. And third, the tactics used by Churchill. In the historical context, the first thing that is most obvious to anyone is the speech took place in 1946. World War II had just ended, and Churchill had just lost the election to the British Prime Minister. America had just gone through a horrible war, and Churchill was no longer a politician. Churchill had led the Allies, Britain, and the United States through the war, and they had won. The fact that Churchill was not reelected was a big deal. He was now a private citizen and could use the speech to say whatever he wanted because he was no longer a politician. He calls himself a private visitor in the speech, and that is very important. He is a man addressing other men. He is not a politician addressing civilians. Fear of communism had been around since the Russian Revolution in 1917, where the communists overthrew the Russian government. The only reason why the Allies ignored communism during World War II was because they wanted Russia's help to defeat Hitler. Churchill predicted the whole time that the relationship between Russia would go bad quickly after the war ended because the Soviet Union wanted the spread of communism around Europe. Secondly, another key thing about the context of the speech was the fact that President Truman was there but claims he had no idea what Churchill was going to say. That meant that Churchill pulled out this very surprising and explosive speech without anybody expecting it. The next thing that needs to be addressed is the purpose of this speech. This speech was very clear and had one main purpose. The purpose was to get American support behind him and the nation to fight the spread of communism across Europe. The last thing is tactics. Churchill's biggest tactics were his wording in the speech. He used the words, quote-unquote, us factor. He wanted to make America and Great Britain appear like they were brother and sister nations. He called America a kinder nation and said, quote, our American military colleagues, end quote, to emphasize the fact that they have just fought in a war together. Also, he goes from addressing the audience as you to then saying we and us when he makes the distinction of communicating between when Russia says our and we. The most significant part of the speech is when he brings the famous metaphor of the Iron Curtain. The Iron Curtain is the spread of Soviet influence, which is also the spread of communism. He names all of the countries in Eastern Europe which have fallen to the influence of communism as referring to them as the Iron Curtain. He says that, quote, the Iron Curtain has descended across the continent, end quote, which gives an image of doom and it is very effective. The only remedy to this and the only way to fight it is what he calls, quote, a new unity in Europe. Therefore, he is setting up a good guy and a bad guy and allowing the audience to select which side they will be on. The outcome of this speech. I would say this is one of the most successful speeches ever given in time, but the most successful speech given in the Cold War. It got America's attention, it got people's attention. The speech was very strategic. It was not given in a political arena like Parliament or in a political rally. It was given to a bunch of students, but the press, but the press got it, and the message was clear, and the speech was available across America. Churchill had managed to give an effective speech to a group of students in an area of the United States which is not particularly pro-British. And it was during so, he convinced America across the country how important it was to stop communism and the importance of speaking your actions.